Good evening to those of you who are the first ones to join us here in the second of the Primary Club Fireside Chats. We're going to spend a couple of minutes whilst everyone gets to come and join us, which we cannot wait for. In the meantime, we have a sensational duo who are going to be joining us after we had Pat Cummins last week. And Jim Maxwell. Jim, I would suggest that the first one went particularly well.
It seemed to, and we raised a vast amount of money very quickly. So it made us think that all the other functions we put on throughout the year are useless compared to having a Zoom chat. And all we need is another pair of cricket beds to put up for auction, because Pat Cummins seemed to do the job twice. It was all good fun. And we had a lot of people, the old, the young, and the rest of it tuning in after having their spaghetti bolognese or whatever in the evening. And it was a lot of fun. So I think we can thank coronavirus for absolutely nothing except the opportunity of doing this. And it's going well.
Absolutely right. That is a sensational shirt you've got yourself there. Where did you first get your hands on that particular piece of gear?
This is the Primary Club Tour shirt. I'm trying to keep the England badge over here out of the way, because it might be offensive to some people, but it was from last year's Primary Club Tour of England. And I could have worn the blazer, but that's a bit over the top for an evening show in the way that we are doing it. So that's the story of it, yeah.
I love
it. Comes from last year's tour of England, which was a lot of fun. I was just on the sidelines having a look, as most senior citizens do these days, and have a glass of wine and enjoy the cricket.
That's important. Well, I would imagine that most people have come in now. So a huge welcome to everyone who has signed up, either those who were with us last month or those who are with us for the first time. It's a bit of a process to register, but we love that you have, because it is absolutely worthless. This is a monthly webinar series brought to you by the Primary Club of Australia. We have a bunch of guests coming up, including the likes of Damien Fleming and Sean Marsh, Lisa Stalaker, Ed Cowan. Last month we had Pat Cummins to kick us off, which was sensational. And tonight we cannot wait to have an in-depth chat with both Greg Chappell and Mark Taylor. A huge thank you to our sponsors. Our series sponsor, Vocus Communications, bringing the technology of this webinar series together. And of course, it's something that we absolutely love doing and could not do it without Vocus. So thank you so much. And it's something that we hope that those of you who may be sitting there watching feel the need to get involved, because the money goes to such a great cause, and something that Jim Maxwell, who is the voice of cricket in this country, knows so much about. Jim Maxwell, welcome. Hello. Good to see you again, friend.
Hello, Matt. How are you? Are you reveling in the pandemic?
I have made the most of the fact that New South Wales, at least, is slightly opening up. So I apologise for having this slightly unseemly headpiece on. I'm down in the South Coast. I'm in the Kangaroo Valley. I'm actually at the place that I got married, this beautiful property called Melrose Farm.
Yes, a UFO just went past your right shoulder. Did you see it? Yeah,
yes,
it did.
Yes. If I glitch out, I'm so sorry. I'm in the heart of the Kangaroo Valley, and I'm on a baby moon with my wife, soon to be mother of our first child, and I've interrupted it to come here and have a chat, because I said, babe, cricket first, marriage second. Don't worry about it. So that's what we're here for. So I apologise for this, and I cannot wait. Coronavirus has been such a thing, right? It's been hard to get away.
You're on one of those dodgy Indian phone lines too, Matt. I can hear that.
Is it that bad?
No, it comes and goes. That's all right. That's the joy of listening and watching these things. You don't want perfect transmission. It's like our ABC broadcasts from India. They're always much better when we reverted to a mobile phone.
Okay, I will try to.
You're in the Kangaroo Valley, so there you go.
I'll try to keep myself to a bit of a minimum, because I think it'll drop in and out, but that's absolutely fine. And Jim, before we get to our guests who are sitting there very patiently, and Mark and Greg, thank you so much. For those who may have been joining us for the first time and don't know a huge amount about the Primary Club, tell us a little bit about what the primary club is and does and what the money goes to?
Well, it's raising funds for those who are disabled, who are connected to sport. And it comes about in so many different ways, from providing equipment, providing opportunities for various organisations that deal with all sorts of levels of disability. It could be a physical disability, intellectual disability, many cases of these playgrounds that various organisations have, and they need certain type of equipment which costs a fair bit of money. And so we either kick in the lot or some part of it. So it's very hard to put your finger on specifically where the donations, where the generosity of Golden Duck sponsors is going, because there are so many different projects that come along to us. And we're doing it mainly in New South Wales, but certainly in Victoria and South Australia. And since the primary club came into existence in 1974, we're up to about 7 million in handouts to various needy organisations, and in things like the Roden Cutler Award, which goes to the outstanding disabled athlete of the year. And there have been a variety of people, including, of course, most famously, Kurt Fernley, going back over a number of years. Louis Savage was another one of those going back, and Liesl Tesh is now a member of Parliament, and the skier Michael Milton, yes, and the girl on the sailability. What was her name? Amy Bumble, yes. So there's been a lot of people who've benefited from the primary club's work, and around all of that, of course, is the theme of cricket. I don't think there's anyone who's ever played the game who wouldn't qualify to be a member of the primary club. Even our esteemed guests, I think I'll be able to relate some story there or two about the misfortune they may have had very occasionally in their careers in getting out first ball. But the cricket is the connection, to the point that we actually have, as I mentioned before with this tour last year, a cricket team that plays regularly in Sydney and the city and suburban comp and around that. And we've had tours not just to England last year, but to Kenya the year before, New Zealand, Golden Oldies tours over the years. So it's an active club as well as a supportive one. And I think that's about the nature of it. But throw Matt or me a line if you want to know a little bit more. But
absolutely.
Plenty of information there on the website.
Yeah, and that's it. And we'd love you to sign up or renew as a member as well. Help support us. It's $50 a year to join. For members, the renewals are due at the end of June, which, is on its way up as well. Yeah. So we have Jim, who is obviously president of the primary club, and it's a perfect opportunity to welcome our guest. Mark Taylor, first and foremost, a patron of the primary club and the 12th man of the charity you took over from Richie Benno on his passing in 2015. Mark Taylor, welcome. So glad that you can join us in the second of our fireside chats.
Thank you, Matt. Nice to be online. I just hope Greg and I can keep up with the Pat Cummins standard, because
it was high.
That's probably why you've got both Greg and I on, and only had one current player, and now you've got two oldies online. So we'll try and do our best to make it as interesting as the one you did with Pat only a few weeks ago.
That's absurd. Firstly, I mean, the money that he raised was quite ridiculous. It seemed there was a lady in England who was very keen on his Ashes signed boots. We'll see if we can't raise that amount of money. Where are you joining us from this evening?
I'm at home in Gladesville in Sydney.
Great wall behind you.
Internet connection should be okay, fingers crossed. And I've had to, like I think Greg and everyone involved, had to sit down with my daughter this afternoon and made sure I had the Zoom set up correctly and what have you. So I thank her for what she did. But yeah, looking forward to the next hour, mate.
Yeah, that's great. And Greg Chappell as well, the Honorary Vice President of the Primary Club for over 20 years. Greg, welcome as well. So great to have you.
Thank you, Matt. Nice to be here, joining you from sunny downtown Brisbane. So happy to be involved and looking forward to a good night.
I was on the way down to, so the venue that I'm at is this beautiful venue called Melrose Estate, where we got married. And on the way, we stopped via Bendooley in sort of Barrel, and they have this big bookstore, and there was a whole bunch of sports books, and I was just perusing them on the way through. And there's a whole bunch of Greg Chappell books, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading, knowing that we're going to be chatting tonight. Which one of those are we going to be auctioning this evening? Because the first of our auction items is something that you've graciously donated. What is that one?
This is the latest book, Fierce Focus, which is obviously pretty much a love story. So that'll be a signed copy, hardback copy. I'm not sure whether that one finished up in Barrel, but glad to hear that the other copies of other books are lying around somewhere.
Did you write all yours? Have you had books written by others that you've just gone, where did this come from? Are they all from your pen?
No, there's been a couple of others, but majority of them from myself. But Adrian McGregor did one many years ago at the end of my career, which was a biography, which I obviously spent a bit of time with him doing it, but I was very pleased with the job that he did of that. Told the whole story, not the bad with the good. So I think he did a fairly reasonable job of it.
I've just got a text message as well from the great Simon Torfel, one of the great umpires Australia's ever produced and the world has ever produced. Did either of you play under Simon Torfel's eye, and was he a hack or was he all right?
Well, put it this way, he wasn't the worst umpire going around. There you go.
Nice rap.
Simon's not old enough for me to have played under him, but I did coach a number of times when Simon was in the middle, and I thought he was a very good umpire.
Very good.
He's all right. He's all right. He lives in Barrel, and thank you for joining us, Simon. Thank you for everyone as well. So here's how it's going to work. We're going to have a chat. Jim and Greg and Mark are going to have a chat for a while. What we want you to do are two things. One, if you have a question for either of these two greats, jump on the Q&A feature of Zoom and write whatever you want. Any question that you have, we're going to be asking these guys. That's the first part. And as with Pat last month, there's a whole raft of questions. Nothing's off limits. This is hardly being broadcast to the mainstream, so we can have a nice little fireside chat here. Thanks to the Primary Club. So jump onto the Q&A feature, ask any question. The other part is the auction. And we have, for the first half, between now and 8:30, the signed book by Greg Chappell. All proceeds going, obviously, to the Primary Club. What we want you to do is write into the chat feature your bid. We'll continue to update you with that. After 8:30, we have a new auction item, which we won't tell you about yet. And that one, Mark Taylor is offering. So any questions, throw it in the Q&A. Any bids, throw it in the chat feature of your Zoom. And any questions you have, we're going to be throwing to these guys in the back half. But Mr. Maxwell, it's a pleasure to hand over to you and these two greats of the game. I can't wait to sit back and watch. And I've upgraded from the water from last episode to the red wine this time, and I look forward to sitting back and enjoying what you guys have to offer.
Very good. Well, I hope everyone's got a glass in hand or whatever, or wherever you may be around the dining room table. I'm kicking your heels up. We'll get the serious questions out of the way first, fellas. What about that? You ready?
Sounds good.
Okay. Righto. Well, Greg played 87 tests. Mark played 104. Greg made 12 ducks. Mark made 5. These are the relevant statistics about two outstanding batsmen who played for Australia. The interesting thing is, in test matches of those 12 ducks scored by Greg, 6 were primaries. Of Mark's 5 ducks, not one. Not a primary. Now, are you proud of the fact that you never got out first ball in a test match, Mark Taylor, or a one-day where you got 4 ducks and never a primary? What happened? How did you avoid that ignominy?
Well, I'm proud of the fact I didn't get a primary duck in. I did get one for Australia in a game at Hove, I think it was.
Yeah.
Edged the first ball of the game there for a primary duck in a tour match, but never got one in an international match. The disappointing thing is, you say 5 test ducks I made in 104 tests, and I made 2 in one game. That's the thing that pees me off the most. And I made 2 in my first game as captain, a pair on debut as captain. So I'd have gladly tossed in one of those ducks for a primary somewhere else, because we also lost my first test as captain in Karachi in 1994 by a wicket with Inzamam ul Haq and was it Mushtaq Ahmed, I think, putting on 57 or something for the last wicket to win the game. So if I'd have made even a handful more runs, we may well have won that game. So I'd have absolutely given up one of those ducks for a primary somewhere else.
What is it about the number 0 that seems to be so significant, Greg, in the game of cricket? And you had the misfortune to have a string of them in about 81, 82. And I remember someone asking you at the time, why are you getting out for these ducks? And you made some comment about, well, maybe I'm just not watching the ball or not watching it closely enough. So, I mean, anyone can get a duck. I mean, it shouldn't undermine your reputation or your career. I mean, anyone can get out for 0. Do you remember that little period? 7 straight ducks?
I don't think it was 7 straight, Jim, but you're getting close. I mean,
it's close.
It's nice of you to bring it up, but
I just thought I'd get the important stuff out of the way
I'm
first.
disappointed I'm not a life member of the primary club. I mean, I must have raised more money for the primary club in those few weeks than anyone but Pat Cummins, I would have thought. But no, look, it just shows you the openers have got it easy. They go out there and the bowlers haven't warmed up and they serve up a pile of poo for them early on. And then number 3 and number 4 come in and have got to deal with the good balls. But that's that's the way it goes. I think that the actual story that you were referring to was in that string of ducks. I think Wilkins asked me the question, why are you batting so badly? And I said, actually, I'm not batting that badly. I'm just getting out. Because I wasn't batting long enough to bat badly. When you get out first ball, it's pretty hard to bat badly. But then I think the follow-up question, because I think I also said, but I don't think I'm batting that badly. I'm just getting out. I think there's a big score around the corner. And someone said, well, how long do you think it'll be? And I said, look, I know it's just around the corner. What I can't tell you is how long the street is. So that was the deal for a few weeks there. It felt like it lasted for about 3 months, but in fact, it was in a period of around about 3 weeks. Some couple in test matches and the rest, a handful of them in one day. So it wasn't one of the better periods of my career, but just shows you the game can be a humbling game.
I remember, Jim, just following on from that, I can remember Ian Chappell telling me a story when I was going through a terrible run of outs. I didn't get any primary ducks, as you mentioned. And Ian Chappell told me many years ago that Doug Walters had the issue for me. I worked out what I was doing wrong in that time. He said the problem that I was making is I was batting too long. He said I should have taken a leaf from Greg's book, got a few more noughts, first ballers, and just got out of there, because the longer you bat, the worse you look. And then people know you're out of form. I think Greg had it right in the 80s. I certainly got it wrong in the late 90s. I know that.
Yeah, I think the fans, the critics are much kinder to you, aren't they? If you get out for a first ball duck, then hang around for 40 minutes and look dreadful and play one onto your stumps for 5. Batting's a terminal experience. You're going to go at some stage. Better to go straight away if you have to.
Well, if you know you're only going to get 5, you might as well go early. I think you're right, Jim. And thanks for bringing up many of my innings there, actually. Very ordinary 5s.
Yes. Well, let's move on. I mean, this is about the primary club, and thank you very much for appearing tonight and talking around whatever subjects we get into. And there's plenty of meat on the bone, I suppose, and there'll be a lot of people out there want to know from both of you, what do you think about the condition of the game? I mean, there's uncertainty, obviously, with a coronavirus pandemic around us, and whether or not that's going to be knocked on the head by the time we get to the cricket season. Let's hope so. But Greg, how do you see the state of affairs? I see today Earl Eddings has come out and said, well, we didn't actually lose any money on the stock market. So what was all the kerfuffle about in the last couple of months about Australia's the financial position and the need to send all these people on staff on a holiday?
No, I don't really know, to be honest. It does seem really strange. It wasn't that long ago that we, after the World Cup here in Australia, quite a bit of money had been put into the Future Fund, and the game seemed to be in pretty good health. As we know, it's a cycle. When England tours Australia and when India tours Australia, or we're playing against them, they're good years. But in the other seasons when India and England aren't involved with Australia, it's tough going. So I know that they're conscious of the cycles, but it really does seem strange that a few months ago we seemed to be in good shape, and then all of a sudden we weren't in good shape, and no cricket had been played. We hadn't lost any cricket at that point. So it is hard to understand, but it's worrying from the point of view of just what the long-term effect of this coronavirus is to sport generally and to cricket in particular. Having been involved with Cricket Australia for many years and involved with all of our development programs and so on, I know how much money we were investing in the future of Australian cricket, both men and women's cricket. If that money is going to be cut significantly, I worry about what effect that might have on the development of the next generation of cricketers. And if it's a problem for Australia, it's certainly going to be a problem for most other cricket-playing countries other than India and England. So the impact that it has, long-term for the game is of some concern. But the game's been pretty resilient. The death of the game has been called quite a few times before in the history of the game, particularly Test cricket, and thankfully Test cricket still survived and looked to be pretty healthy last year in England with the Ashes series and the World Cup in England. You were there for some of it. I was certainly there for the World Cup, and thought it was a magnificent spectacle for cricket. So I'm hoping that we get out of the other side of this, and Australian cricket's healthy and everybody else is as well, because otherwise it'll be a tough row to hoe for some of the cricket playing countries.
I'll just come back on the Test cricket bit of it in a moment, but Mark, of course, you're involved in so many ways as captain, as a commentator, as a director of Australian cricket, and so the ins and outs. It strikes me that the Australian cricket team is going a lot better than the administration. How do you read it all at the moment?
Yeah, I think Greg touched on it with the word uncertainty. That's the problem. The problem Australian cricket has is it bases everything it does on what it thinks it will make, on what we think the game will make. And generally around TV rights, crowds, these sorts of things, where all the money comes from, that pays people's wages, from people who work within cricket, from people who play the game at a professional level. And it's all based on what we think the game will make, and then it's sort of smoothed out over 4 years. So in a really good year, as Greg said a moment ago, when India tours or England tours, people don't make this much money. And then when Pakistan and New Zealand comes, as they did last year, they make this much. They make that much. And that's the way it's smoothed out. And everything I suspect, and I don't know these days because I haven't been on the board now for 18 months, but I suspect at the end of last summer, which would have been the lesser of the summers over the last 4 years, because Pakistan and New Zealand were here. The income wouldn't have been there, the revenue wouldn't have been there that there were in previous years. So cricket's reserve level would have been at its lowest point. What it actually was, I don't know. Then the coronavirus hits, right when India are about to come. So the uncertainty, I think, has made life very difficult for Cricket Australia, no doubt. And now they're trying to project what might happen in what everyone's now calling this new world that we live in. And they're trying to get it right. And what they think is right is not necessarily what we're hearing at the moment, what Cricket New South Wales think is right, or what the Players Association think is right. So everyone's now trying to work out what is the right figure and what will be the case for next summer's revenue, when nobody really knows. We don't even know if the Cricket World Cup, which is scheduled to be played here in Australia in October, whether that's going ahead yet. If it does, Cricket Australia straight away will get I've read $20 million is going to be their hosting fee. That's money they'll receive. If it doesn't go ahead, they don't receive that. That's as simple as that. So that money that they would have budgeted for and planned for won't come. And that's where I think the real uncertainty lies, and why you're hearing so many different stories about, what is going to happen, who will get pay cuts, who will get laid off, all these sorts of things, is because no one really knows.
But has Cricket Australia, with its success, become a bloated organisation? Does it need to be cutting back on its staff?
Well, as we often say, you don't really know what they're like until they're gone. I see Graham Hicks lost his job during the week, and yet if you ask many of the Australian batsmen, I'm sure they'd say they'd love to have Graham Hick around. Will he make a difference to their scores? Only time will tell. And I suspect probably not, because players will learn to adapt and spend more time working out their own concerns, which was the way that Greg and I played many, many years ago. The bigger concern is those people who work in the schools, who work in the clubs, who are trying to obviously continue to grow the game. Are they all needed? Probably not. But which ones aren't needed? That's going to be very difficult. It's easy to say when things are going well, things are too fat. But then you say, okay, we've got to cull someone, we've got to cull a lot of people. Who is it going to be? That's going to be very difficult to get right.
At the heart of this, without going back to one of the legendary dining experiences I had with Greg Chappell and his brother Ian some years ago, talking about another incident in the game of cricket, Javed Meandad and Dennis Liddy. Greg, I can hear your brother saying it's all about leadership. And there's been an upheaval at board level in changing the nature of the board from one based on the old, federation, the states running the game, to having independent directors. So where does the leadership of the game need to go at the moment?
Well, I think we need people around who understand the game. I've argued for many years with a number of board directors over many years, when board directors have talked about, they've got to get the business right. They've got to get the business right. And my argument has always been, no, get the cricket right and the business will look after itself. You can find lawyers and accountants when you need them, but you can't find good cricketers if you don't have the game in good health. And what worries me going forward, I know Cricket Australia's already lost a lot of really good people. But what worries me more is that they've cut playing opportunities for the next generation of players, and particularly through the pathways and so on. And I think that's a huge mistake. Supposedly it's only for the short term. I hope it is, because the way you learn to play cricket is playing cricket. It's not from spending hours and hours in the nets. It's from actually getting out there and competing against others and starting to learn about yourself and how to play the game. And I just think that if we don't look after the future, the development of young players, we'll wake up in 10 years' time and wonder what went wrong. And that's what concerns me. I know they're looking for a new chief executive at the moment, and I hope they look hard and long, and they go as far and wide as they need to go to find somebody who really understands the game, and we start to make sure that the investment in the future, the research and development with the young players, is there to get the development that we need to produce the next Pat Cummins. Well, I think we've got someone who might be the next Pat Cummins, maybe even slightly different from Pat Cummins in Cameron Green in Western Australia. I think he's a super young cricketer. We need those guys to be getting playing opportunities so that they develop in a timely way to be able to produce their best for Australia in all formats. we can't afford not to keep throwing up good playing talent.
If I could just jump in there very briefly, fellas, very, very quickly. Auction closed on the Greg Chappell book. Congratulations, Michael Payne, $550. That is a superb price. So thank you very much, Michael.
Very good.
If you can throw your email address in the chat there, we'll be in touch. Congratulations. Mark, we'll open the auction now for your item. What have you got, sir?
Well, I've got an unusual piece of memorabilia, Matt. It's a signed cricket bat, right? But if you can see the Channel 9 logo on there, this is a signed cricket bat signed by the commentators in the 2018 season, which unfortunately, and I say that because I'm still with the network, unfortunately was our last season as the broadcaster of the cricket. So you've got Bill Laurie, Ian Chappell, yours truly, Ian Healy, Michael Slater, Shane Warne, Michael Clark, Mark Nicholas, and Michael Vaughan, the England captain. They're the names. That was the commentary team for the last year of Channel 9's 40-odd year history of commentating on the cricket. So that's my auction item.
That's amazing.
Yep.
And we can even increase the price if you scrub off the last two names. If you'd like, we can do that. That's entirely up to you. So the auction now starts. Same thing. Throw it in the chat. Scott Pittaway has offered up $500 to start the bidding. So we are away. I'm sorry, Jim, please, back to you.
That's all right. Just bid in increments of 500 and we'll be going fine. Right? Get stuck in. But just on Channel 9, doesn't Channel 9 have the rights to the T20 World Cup?
We do.
So you're not finished yet.
No, I'm not finished yet. I don't want to be finished. I still very much enjoy commentating.
You're a radio commentator nowadays too.
Yeah, well, I've got to say, Jim, I actually enjoyed doing the radio last year because what I'm finding these days, still working with Channel 9, is most of the work that I'm doing now is hosting or co-hosting games and we are taking world feeds. ICC events are generally done by an ICC cricket commentary team, which will be the case for the men's World T20 if it goes ahead in Australia this year, and the women's World 50 over game next year. Channel 9 have got the rights to both of those, but I'll be hosting those. But it was great last year to do a little bit of radio and just get out there and actually watch the game and call the game, because that's what I enjoy the most. Talking about the issues in the game is one thing, but the thing I enjoy the most was A, when I played, but B, was actually commentating on the game. All these other side issues, you can talk around them forever and you get a little bit sick and tired of talking about issues around the game. I like to watch the game, try and analyse the game and give people at home my thoughts on the game. That's what I enjoy the most.
Yes, that's been the most difficult thing about the last couple of months, trying to watch something live. And it's all right for people like me who like horse racing, but there's been nothing else on live. Been replaying footy matches and cricket matches and watching Tiger Woods' greatest golf for the umpteenth time. Now, just to finish on this business of where cricket's going, this is the question. And I hope Darshak Mehta, who's out there listening in his lounge room, is ready for this, because he wanted to make sure it was asked. Will Andrew Strauss be a good CEO of Australian cricket? Is that the way to go? Away you go, boys. What do you reckon?
Go on,
Greg,
Mark.
you go first.
If it comes to it.
Look, I think Andrew Strauss did a wonderful job in his role, high performance with England for a number of years, turned their cricket around. He's obviously a very good cricket person. I hope he's one person that Cricket Australia pursues for the role. I think he's got the qualifications, certainly from a cricket point of view. I really believe we need someone who's got a very strong cricket background to lead Australian cricket forward. So I think he would do a good job, yes.
I certainly
Mark?
agree with that. My only question would be around the business side. I think Andrew would do a terrific job on the cricket side, no doubt about that. The relationship side is the other key. getting all these stakeholders together and thinking about the greater good of the game in this country. Anyone who can do that right at the moment, I think will take the game forward. I'm always fairly optimistic when I look at Australian cricket. Before the pandemic hit, the Australian men's team got back to number 1 in the world in tests and T20 cricket. And I think they're 4 or 5 in one-day cricket, but that far from number 1, it's not funny. Our women are the best by a mile in all formats of the game. So I think the health of the game in this country is very good. The problem that we're having is we're not all working together enough, in my opinion. And I'd like to see a bit more of that. So whoever it is, that's a key role. But there is also that business side of the game. And you look about this summer, and I mentioned it a moment ago, this is, I've read reports of $300 million summer. And I think that's about what it is when India come. That takes some operation as well. So you just can't get a really good cricketer in there to say, run the business of Australian cricket. A really good cricketer who understands that would be perfect.
Righto. Now there'll be a few people out there saying it's about time to talk about the players. So let's have a crack at that. You mentioned the fact that Australia, despite all its problems in recent years with Sandpaper Gate and players having lost respect because of it, seem to have had a rejuvenation. And although he's been an accidental captain, Tim Paine seems to have done a remarkable job. An assessment from both of you on what he's doing, is continuing to do, and perhaps where we go next in terms of who's going to lead the Australian team, given that Tim won't be there forever. Greg, can you start?
Yeah, look, we all know, I think, how good a job Tim has done. And I think the way Australian cricket has bounced back, the men's team particularly has bounced back following that disappointing day in Cape Town. I think it's a great credit not only to the players themselves, but to the whole organisation, the way they got together and made sure that Australian cricket recovered quickly from that setback. But yes, he probably was an accidental captain, Tim Paine, but I think everyone knew what a champion young man he is, but for a few injuries, one very bad thumb injury, finger injury. He may well have played 100 test matches for Australia. He was always a good wicketkeeper. He was a good batsman as well in his early days. But the way he's taken on the role with the good humour that has gone with it, the leadership, the inclusion, everything that he's done has been very, very positive. Where we go after that is a very good question. It depends how long Tim goes for, but as you say, it won't be for forever. The obvious choice is to go back to someone like Steve Smith, because one thing that you can be sure of, that Steve will be worth his place in the team. Do we lose runs if Steve becomes captain again? Because it's a huge job, and I know he found it difficult last time he did it. Are we better off just to let him go and make as many runs as he can and find someone else to lead the team? It will depend when that happens, when Tim finishes, as to what likely decision is taken.
Mark, what's your read on Paine and his successor?
Oh, well, Tim, no doubt, I think just got better the more he was in the job. No doubt about that. There's no doubt he was an accidental captain. I don't think, when we look at his selection, he wasn't even selected for Tasmania around the time that the Australian selectors picked him in a game. I think it was against England in Adelaide, a two-day trial game, I think it was, in Adelaide, to give him a chance to do something. He made a 50, I believe, kept well. Australian selectors were tossing up with Matthew Wade as well, and then they went, no, we're going to go for Paine, and into the side he goes, and 6 months later in Cape Town we have Sandpaper Gate. So all of a sudden he goes from Tasmania at best to the Australian captaincy. Would have been a huge shock to him, but he had plenty of experience as a player, no doubt about it, and a lot of resilience because of the injuries he had. And there's no doubt he could have played many more games if it wasn't for the finger injury. So I think he had that background, and it was like, wow, I've been given this opportunity to play cricket for Australia, and now they've made me captain. I think he was like a kid in a toy shop. It was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And I think that's how he started, and he's just got better now that he understands the role. I thought in England last year he was excellent. In England, he had so much go against him. I was there at Leeds when Australia lost that Test match by a wicket, and he was in tears. I interviewed him at the end of the game, and he was seriously holding back tears, as you can imagine. Australia win that game like they looked like they were going to, and they've got the Ashes. They've hung on to the Ashes and would have won the series in England, but all of a sudden it's back to 1-1 and they're a chance of losing. Well, he turned those tears into, I think, a fierce, competitive look at for the next game, which was at Old Trafford. And Australia came out ready and prepared to fight again and won that Test match, and deservedly won that Test match. And I think that had a lot to do with Tim Payne and the way he was able to, as I said, turn that huge disappointment of Headingley into a resounding win at Old Trafford was huge credit to him.
And just before we get into all the viewers' questions that Matt De Groot's ready to go, when it comes to succession, Mark, who should take over? Back to Smith? Or do we go somewhere else? Do we know where we're going to go?
Well, I don't think we know at this stage. And I think Greg's right. I think it will depend on how long Tim goes for. If he continues to play well, keep well, chip in with his share of runs, and I don't think he needs to be averaging 50. If he can chip away, make the useful 30s and 35s that he does, average around 30, I think that's all Australia need at the moment. And captain well, I think he can play for a few more years. The longer he plays, I think the less likely Steve Smith will captain again. But I think if Tim only lasts another season or so, I think Steve Smith, to me, is the logical choice.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got some questions from out there and about the place, and maybe an update on the auction. We're up to 1,000 yet, Matt, for that bat?
Sitting at $999 is the current top. David Moyle, and I get your Channel 9 enthusiasm, and it's sweet, it's cute, but we can do better. Mark, read the list of the players who've signed that bat again. Just remind us.
Right. So I've put my own little sticker on it. That's my little handiwork. It says commentators. How well can you see that? Commentators 28.
Yes,
Bill Laurie, Ian Chappell, myself, Ian Healy, Michael Slater, Shane Warne, Michael Clark, Mark Nicholas, and Michael Vaughan. There you go. So there they are.
All right. My first question, and it's straight from me to you, Mark. Compare Channel 9's cricket coverage to the 7 and Fox. Do you sit there and you go, you're doing it all wrong? How do you feel when you watch it?
All I'll say is chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
I'm not saying which way around. Not
Good. So a whole bunch of people have been writing questions, and both do that and also continue to bid, as we say. It'll shut at 9 o'clock. All right, so we'll race through them. There's plenty of questions. So Scott Pittaway, by the way, $1,200. Thank you, sir. You are the current leader. First question, Mark. Who is the toughest player you've played against, and why?
Oh, wow. There's probably a few that spring to mind. Viv Richards springs straight to mind. Really tough competitor when I first started playing. The 91 West Indies tour was undoubtedly the hardest tour I ever went on. And I include all the subcontinental tours that, they are challenging, yes, but playing in the Caribbean in 91 was the toughest tour I ever went on. So he springs to mind. But like Arjuna Ranatunga was a tough competitor. And actually, I actually really liked Arjuna. I don't know why. I must be a bit of a weird person. You just knew that Arjuna was going to do everything he could to try and win the game for his team. And in a way, you've got to give him respect for that. Sometimes he'd really peeve you off. Don't worry about that, with sore calves and hamstrings and what have you. But you just knew it was all part of his master plan. So he was a tough competitor, no doubt about that. And all the West Indies opening bowlers, I reckon they were all tough because I was scared of all of them. There you go.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Greg, how fast was Tomo really?
really fast. I remember asking, I think he was certainly high up in the traffic department in the South Australian Police about 20 years ago. I think Sean Tate had just been clocked at 160 kilometres an hour. I think Brett Lee had been clocked at 160 kilometres an hour. Tomo had been clocked at 160 miles an hour some years before, bearing in mind that he'd come out of the bar having had a drink with Kerry Packer, and Kerry said, "You should be out there bowling." So Tomo went out there in his street shoes and bowled at 160 clicks. But when I spoke to the guy from the SA Police, said, "Just tell me the difference in the technology." And he said, "Look, when Tomo was clocked at 160 kilometres an hour, it was at the end of the carry, so it was at the wicketkeeper. But Sean Tate and Brett Lee were clocked out of the hand at 160 kilometres an hour." He said if Tomo was clocked on that technology to 160, with the new technology, he would have been 170. And I think that pretty much sums it up. Michael Holding, I heard speaking at a function some years ago, and someone asked him the question, who was the quickest? And he said, look, on our day, we were all quick, but then there was Tomo. He was in a class of his own. For 2.5 years, I've never seen anything like it. Up until he broke his shoulder in the collision with Alan Turner in the Adelaide Test match. He was never the same after that, never the same elasticity, and probably the recovery techniques in those days were not quite the same as they are today. I don't think he had the same strength and flexibility in that shoulder after that injury. He could still bowl quick, but he had to work a lot harder. I think Tomo's great quote, he was asked after his second test match, how would you describe your action? Because he just tiptoed in and bowled very quick, and he just said, oh, heck. He said, I just shuffle in and go wang, and that's pretty much what he did. But after he injured his shoulder, he had to run in and put a bit more effort into it to generate that speed. But it was a unique action. He was a javelin thrower as a kid as well. But he actually put the arm right behind his back. And I've got a photograph somewhere in my collection of him in the bowling action with his front arm and his back basically at the batsman. His front arm was up high, but his front foot was up at shoulder height. And he slammed that down and leveraged over the top of that front leg. I reckon Tomo at full height was about 6'1", but when he bowled, he let it go as though he was Joel Garner. He came from a much greater height than anyone at 6'1". His length balls used to go through chest height, so he didn't have to bowl bounces. He was scary.
All right, Greg, there is no way to avoid this because there's a whole bunch of questions about it. So let's do it front and center. This one from Richard for Greg. With the upcoming 20th anniversary of the legendary test match in New Zealand with the underarm ball, how do you feel remembering this event? And I'll join it with Peter Warner's question. How do you feel? And also, do you think with the sandpaper event, you are now off the hook with the underarm?
I doubt it. I don't think anyone expected, not least of all me, that they'd be still talking about the underarm here. Is it only 20 years? It seems a lot longer than that. 40 years, isn't it? It's getting...
maybe 40.
40 years, yeah.
It feels like a lot longer ago than 20 years. We've been talking about it for a long time. We haven't got time to go into the whole details, but it had a lot less to do with the game on the day than a whole lot of stuff that was going on around cricket at the time. We'd been through World Series cricket, and that was over players' conditions, including pay. When we came out the other side of World Series cricket, we were certainly being paid better. But most of the other problems that were in the game before World Series cricket were still there after World Series cricket. Programming was a huge problem after World Series cricket. I think certainly the first year after World Series cricket, we had 2 touring teams and we played alternate test matches. So we played the first test against the West Indies, the second test against England, third test against the West Indies, and so on. In between which we played some one-day games. We played all the double headers on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, and I can tell you as captain, 2 one-dayers back-to-back was much harder than than a test match. You just didn't have any time to recover any mistakes that were made. The MCG wicket was a mess. And so there were a whole lot of arguments going on off the field, which I was involved in. We didn't have media managers. We had a team manager, but all he did was worry about flights and so on. So anything to do with the team, the captain was the focal point. And on that day, I said it at the time, and I'll say it probably forever, I wasn't fit to captain a rowboat on that day at the MCG. And really that New Zealand couldn't win the game. It was a one-day and not a test match. They couldn't win the game. They needed 6 off the last over off the last ball to tie the game. It was unlikely to happen. It was really more about a statement of, this is what I think about the whole thing. Cop this and see what you think of it. It actually worked. They sat up and took notice, funnily enough. Finally, I got to sit down and talk to some board members about some of the issues that were on hand. And from that day onwards, things started to get sorted out. So it had an impact long beyond that moment. As we know, it's still, here we are nearly 40 years later, and people are still bringing it up.
We are bringing it up. Mark and Jim, as you know, a former captain and a absolutely keen observer, what do you now feel of it based on, we'll take Pete's question as well, sandpaper as a option, and also for 40 years on, why are we still talking about it?
Oh, well, I think we're always going to talk about it, and the same thing will be about Sandpaper Gate. People won't let it die, particularly in the era that we live in now, this media-driven era that we're in at the moment. Here we're sitting on a Zoom call, where people have got all sorts of devices to record everything these days. Everyone wants more and more media and more news. So we'll talk about what happened that day at the MCG and what was it, 81. We'll talk about what happened in Cape Town a few years ago, also for many years to come. But to me personally, and I'm sure Greg gets sick and tired of answering the same questions as well. Those things are now done and dusted. They've been handled at the time. Yes, you learn from them, and then you move on, and the game moves on. And you've seen that with the Australian cricket side. The side's moving on. Yes, we'll keep talking about it, particularly over a glass of red at a function somewhere, but it's been done. It's been handled, rightly or wrongly. People are going to have their own views. It was handled right. It was handled too tough. Blah blah blah. It's now done. It's now dusted. Get on with it.
Jim,
as perverse as it may sound, the underarm did more for the Australia-New Zealand cricket relationship than almost anything else that's happened, particularly when their Prime Minister said, "Now we know why the Australians wear yellow." Remember that? Oh, it's extraordinary. But I remember a reenactment of this 20 years ago during a one-day game in Auckland. And New Zealand tried hard to make light of it. And they brought back Trevor Chappell to bowl and
Brian McKechnie?
Yeah, Brian McKechnie to bat. And Brian McKechnie was beside himself. He really didn't want to have anything to do with it. It was lunchtime entertainment to try and reenact the revenge for New Zealand of Chappell bowling to McKechnie, McKechnie slogging him for 6. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. He hit him for 4, actually, but I think McKechnie was more concerned 20 years on about hitting the bloody thing at all. he thought he'd miss it completely. But look, it's going to live on through the discussion around cricket for years. And I don't think there's any bad blood 40 years on from all of it. It's just one of those things that occurred. It may have been an aberration at the time, whatever, from Greg, but I still think it did more in a marketing sense to bolster the image of cricket between the two nations, as perverse as the whole incident may have been.
Well, in fact, Jeremy Coney made the comment at a function that I was at in Sydney some years ago that it was the best thing that ever happened to New Zealand cricket. He said we couldn't get anyone to come and watch cricket in New Zealand. We went back there the year after and every ground was filled. I can tell you they came from everywhere just to boo us, basically. But they certainly got behind the New Zealand cricket team, so it actually did a lot of good for New Zealand cricket.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, I got to tell you, the most petrifying thing I've ever done in my hosting career is asking you about that delivery right now. So I couldn't be happier to just tick that off and move it on and say thank you very much for answering so honestly. We continue to the questions, and we're running out of time. So let's move. Well, there's a whole bunch of questions. So, gents, go with the short form answers. Scott Pittaway leading the auction. Nope. Steve Toomey, 1357. From Ben, question for Greg from my 12-year-old son. A, the best cricketer in your family. B, the best captain in your family. Go.
I would say Ian Chappell. Ian was my hero as a kid. Followed him everywhere, admired him and his cricket, and obviously he, being 5 years older, was always that step ahead of me, so he was a great role model to have, and far and away the best captain that I played under or against.
Mark, what is it about Wagga Wagga and sports? So many premier sports folk from here, so I'll take it Warwick's from Wagga Wagga. Cricket, NRL, AFL and golf. Is there a naturally occurring steroid in the water? Should it be on ASADA's list?
Just a great sporting regional town. That's what Wagga certainly was when I was there, and I dare say it probably still is today. I left Wagga in 1978 as a 14-year-old. And you know, which I can tell you right now, only reason I moved is because my father got transferred in his job here to Sydney. So I didn't want to go because it was a sporting town. I played AFL, I played the occasional game of rugby league at Wagga, played cricket, learned how to play golf, hit tennis balls at cricket, in Wagga. So it was just a sporting town. When you went to school on a Monday, everyone in the playground was talking sport. That's how I remember Wagga. Mount Austin High School, I started my high schooling there. It was just all the chat when you weren't obviously trying to do some studies, was all about sport. And that's why they've got so many ex-sporting people from a lot of different sports. You could play anything there, as you've seen, the Laurie Dailies, the Wayne Careys, the Paul Kellys, the Jeff Lawsons, the Michael Slaters. Steve Elkington lived in Wagga for a while. There's an amazing list of sporting people who've lived in Wagga because you could play all those sports at a very good level.
For all three gentlemen, and Jim, you as well, Christopher Brown writes, and again, short form answers. What's the future of Test cricket? What are some potential changes in format, i.e. 4 days, 5 days? How does it survive? Mark, we'll start with you.
I've been an advocate for 4-day test matches for a while now. I just think it would certainly help in the scheduling. Scheduling is an ongoing issue, has been for 100 years in cricket. I think a 4-day test match is plenty of time to get still a very good game of test match cricket and get a result and free up some days in the schedule. So that'd be the first point I make. I certainly hope that test cricket survives for many years to come. It's still, as you saw, when Australia does play an Ashes series like last year, you get great games of test match cricket that you remember. And you don't often remember a lot of all the one days you play.
Greg?
Yeah, look, I hope Test cricket survives. I have some concerns that some countries will struggle to produce enough Test match cricketers to have competitive Test match teams. I think Test matches between Australia and England will continue for some time yet. I think as long as Virat Kohli is around, India will continue to play Test cricket, but it will depend on who's captain of India at any given time. Some of the other countries are going to struggle. I would hope that Ashes Tests stay at 5 days, but it may well be that some other series could go to 4 days.
Mr. Maxwell?
There's a lot of strength to the game of cricket. Perhaps it's one of the few sports, if not the only sport, that can play the game in so many different ways, as we're about to see South Africa are trying a sort of 3 innings game. We still haven't seen the 100. But Test cricket, to me, is the number one form. It's got substance, it's got character, theatre, drama, it's got everything you need. And if cricket was to lose Test matches, I think it would really be a lesser game than the one we see today. But we're all lucky to have it in any shape or form. I can even remember single wicket competition at the Showground in 1968. So wherever you look, there's something special. And I'll tell you another thing that all cricket organisations want to get their head around, because it's out there on the periphery, and that's this concept of last man stands. It's not official. They run their own show. They play after work. And that is a form of the game that is going to become more and more popular with the time constraints that we all have. So long live cricket, whatever it is. 2-a-side, 11-a-side, or whatever.
Good fun. We'll extend the auction for 5 more minutes because people are still bidding. So 9:05 is your end. We'll keep rolling through the questions. Mark, Owen Raymond writes, can you tell us about your love of the Fujitsu air conditioner brand, how you became an ambassador, and your insights you can share about the air conditioner?
Well, I can tell you that I think, I know Jim's only got a polo on, but you can see I've only just got a polo shirt on here. It is quite cool outside my home, but when you've got lovely Fujitsu comfort, you don't need to get around in jumpers.
Superb.
So yeah, I've actually been with the mighty Fujitsu boys since 1998. So what's that? 22 years now.
It's a good arrangement.
Strong, and look, I hope it goes for many years to come.
Good. Speaking of your home, there has been a bunch of people asking, what is behind you? What are the photos? Can you just give us a quick run through of what we can see?
So this one here, photo that was taken with myself and Sir Donald after I'd made my score in Peshawar, which was behind there.
Yeah.
I equalled his score. And that one there, that's the 400 club, they call it. Myself and Graham Gooch at the time were the only two players who'd made 400 runs in a test match. Because he'd made 333 and 123 at Lords, I think it was, against India. And I made the 334 and 92 in the second innings. So we both made over 400 runs in one game. So they did a bit of a memorabilia piece on that.
Question from a seemingly young up-and-coming wannabe sort of figure in the game, Simon Torfel. To the gentleman, what's your best piece of advice for aspiring captains, particularly young captains?
Go on, Mark.
I tell you, one of the best pieces of advice I got was from Alan Border when I took over for a one-day here at the SCG. I went from 12th man in the one-day squad to being in the side and captain because Alan had torn a hamstring and left the one-day squad. And AB walked up to me and said, Tubby, I said, AB, anything you want? He said, Tubby, it's your job now. Just do it your way. And I knew I was only filling in for 2-3 one-dayers while Alan got over this torn hamstring. He said, just do it your way. And that's the best advice I ever got. People make you captain because they like what you see. Of what they see in you, should I say. So just get out there and do it. So if you captain a club side or whatever you do and you captain a certain way, if you get further honours, go and do the same thing. Captain the same way.
Greg?
Yeah, I think trust your instincts. Back your judgment. If you think of something to do it. Don't think about it for this, maybe wait for an over because it may be too late. And I think get out there and try and win the game. I think from the start of the game, get out there and think about winning the game. And if you have to defend and save it at the end, good luck to you. But get out there and try and win.
A question from Josh. Mark, what did you think of your 12th man character?
Yeah, probably not too bad. Not too bad. Could have been a hell of a lot worse.
I heard that Mark was doing it himself.
I loved the bit about the chewing gum.
So good.
Which at some stage said, "Now, Mark, spit that chewy out." I rather like that. But that's
for Greg, what did you think of the Amazon series, The Test, if you've seen it?
Yeah, I thought it was terrific. What a great insight. Most people don't have the opportunity that Mark and I have had, and even Jim has had, to get inside an Australian cricket dressing room, to get that sort of access. through a summer and a tour of England like that, I think was wonderful for the game, for people to be able to see inside, the behind the scenes with an Australian team. I thought it was terrific. Well done. It was very well done. And I think it was great for Australian cricket. The image of Australian cricket really, I think, benefited from that program.
And last question of a matter of, David Moyle snuck in here with a 15.75 bid on the buzzer too. So 15.75 is the winning bid. David Moyle gets the win. Gents, very quickly, your thoughts on eliminating the toss at the start of tests. Is there a better way to do it?
I do like the toss, I must admit. But to me, I've always thought the toss should not decide the game. So I must admit, I'm going to sit on the fence on this one. I wouldn't be against giving the toss to the touring side, because I think you're going to, if there's a problem with pitches, you're going to get it at least sorted out to a certain extent. But I do like the toss in the game. And if the groundsmen are doing the job they should be doing, it's nice to have a toss, because then they're doing a good job and shouldn't know what to do.
Yeah, I love the toss. I think the toss should stay. I think it's a wonderful part of the game. I think you should have a designated tosser though, because I remember one tour of New Zealand, I wasn't winning too many tosses. We needed to win this particular toss, and Kim Hughes was the luckiest bloke I knew. So I sent Kim out to toss. He won the toss, and we duly won the test match.
Amazing. Gents, to wrap it up as well, because thank you so much for your time. The primary club is obviously something both of you have been involved in for a long time. What is it that you think cricket brings to being such an inclusive way to both raise funds and also bring people together? Like, what is it about this sport that's so special? Greg, we'll start with you.
Yeah, look, Jim touched on it before. I mean, cricket is such a unique sport. There is no other sport that I can think of that has three formats that work at the top level of the game, and then there's all these other spin-off things, going back to backyard cricket. It's just a wonderful game. It builds relationships, probably because of the length of the game. You've got time to stop and think and talk and build relationships. It is unique the way it brings people together from all different cultures. And, the primary club's been a wonderful, wonderful ornament to the game as well, and has raised a lot of money, as Jim pointed out earlier, to help people who aren't as privileged as Mark and I were to actually be able to play the game at the highest level. So more power to the primary club and more power to the game of cricket, I reckon.
Mark?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt cricket is particularly a very national game here in Australia. So it does touch a lot of people. Not everyone necessarily wants to play it. Not everyone is sitting in front of their television watching it all the time either. They're listening to radios in the country, those sorts of things. That it is a way to communicate sport to Australia. And I think it's terrific what the primary club do, is because it uses that connection to actually raise some funds for people who wouldn't get the opportunity to play sport. And I like the fact that all the money doesn't necessarily go back into a cricket. It goes into special yachts and playground equipment, these sorts of things. It helps people who might really like cricket, might love the game, but necessarily can't play it. But they can actually enjoy some sort of sport. So that's why I'm involved.
Before we let everyone go, because the viewers have stuck around, can I just throw some of the fun questions at you that have popped up in the last couple of minutes? Because you never get these questions asked, and fuck me, I love it. Paul Nash, who was the worst English bowler you've ever faced? The worst of the worst. Greg, Mark, take a moment to think about it, and then please answer honestly.
Oh, worst English bowler. I'll probably say in his first Test match, Mike Atherton. Mike Atherton debuted at Trent Bridge. I think it was Trent Bridge in 1989. And Jeff Marsh and I both made a heat. We batted all first day, and we made plenty of runs. And Athers came on to bowl his leggies, and he was bowling full tosses, long hops. And then when he did land the odd one, it was such a good pitch, it didn't spin anyway. So we were trying to work out how he could keep Athers on. without not.
Great.
We weren't allowed to get too many runs off one of his overs. We wanted to keep him on. So Mike Atherton, there you go.
Good. Greg?
Yeah, I don't think I actually batted against him in a test match, but I saw Mike Brealey bowl once, and I would love to have had an opportunity to bat against him.
Jim, worst English bowler you've ever seen roll the arm over?
Oh, that's too hard. Too hard. Just too hard.
Ashley Giles.
Frontline bowler. Oh, no. I can't go there. I can think of that. I can't even remember the guy's name. He played in the test match at the Oval. 2000, Watto was batting against him. I think it's the only test he ever played. He bowled some variety of wrist spin. And poor bloke. It was like Johnny Watkins, that infamous day, the SCG, Greg, remember? When he landed on the pitch next door. He had such stage fright. And it was sad to see. So, no. Good luck to anyone who's played cricket and has got a chance to bowl a ball on the test match. But
Steve Harmon.
The experts.
Gents, the funniest prank ever played on you or a teammate, I'll expand Matthew Shields' question, in the dressing room.
In a dressing room. Well, I won't say the funniest prank, but one that springs to mind for me. My first class debut was at the TCA ground in Hobart, against Tasmania. Who was it? I think it was Phil Blizzard, who was playing for New South Wales at the time. Tasmania, who playing New South Wales. He put Maxwell in my box before I went out to bat. And when I got out there to bat, I was feeling very uncomfortable. And I just thought I was nervous, and I'm forever adjusting that region as you do, thinking that this nerves has really got to me. When I came back in, I think I made 13. I came back in, I was in agony, and he thought it was very funny. That was my first class innings.
Awesome. Gregory?
Yeah, I won't mention too many names, but I think the day at the Sydney Cricket Ground that somebody slipped some prawn heads into Rod Marsh's gloves at the end of a test match. They were packed away and didn't get pulled out for a few weeks. I would like to have been at the other end when he unpacked his wicket-keeping gloves, because that wouldn't have been a pretty sight.
Awesome. This question's come from David. He's asked it a few times, so I'll make sure I ask it. Greg, if you were to use the bats of today, would you have been even better, or would your stats have been similar?
Yeah, it'd be an interesting one. Look, I don't know. I mean, maybe the Knicks would have carried further. Balls that you hit in the air might have carried to cover instead of landed in front of them. Who knows? They're very different weapons. I know if you put a group of our bats in a dressing room alongside the current day bats and gave the guys a choice which ones to take out, I know which ones they'd be taking. They wouldn't be taking our bats. The positive, I think, out of our bats, when you hit them in the middle, they went probably as well as the current day bat. But if you hit it off centre, it wasn't going very far at all. And I think that's the big difference. There were plenty of people that hit some big shots with the old bats. Gary Sobers and his 6-6s in an over, and some big hits that I did see through the years. But if you missed that centre, you were in serious trouble. So you had to be very certain, if you were going to hit the ball in the air, that you were going to hit it in the middle of the bat. Otherwise, it wasn't getting out of the circle, let alone out of the ground. So what it forced us to do was to have to get much closer to the ball. So footwork was more important, in the sense that if you couldn't get close to the ball or get back and make room for yourself to hit it in the middle, it wasn't going very far at all.
Amazing. Gentlemen, we need to wrap it up. I appreciate that you've already stuck into overtime, and thank you so very, very much indeed. And
Matt, before you go, I have one question. I have one question of my own to Mark.
Yep.
Mark, are you going to come to the Sydney Cricket Ground on the 3rd of August for the Sports Star Sleep Out for the Chappell Foundation? Yes or no?
Bring your own sleeping bag.
We'll provide your bag. You won't be cold, I can promise you.
3rd of August, it's so far away. I haven't looked at my calendar just yet, Greg. I'll get back to you on that one, mate.
Well, if you might as well say yes, because we'll keep asking until you come. And if you don't say yes, we'll set Darshak Mater onto you, and he'll.
Unfortunately, you Chappells know where I live as well. That's what concerns me.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. It really is an absolute pleasure. And, you know, obviously, Mark, you're a patron, you're the 12th man. Craig, you've been the honorary vice president for over 20 years now. Haven't earned that life membership, but you just keep plugging away and it'll come your way. But thank you so much for being part of it the second. But I believe everyone who's watching would agree, no less than the first.
Thanks, Matt. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg. Mark, terrific.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Matt. Cheers, Mark.
Thanks,
No worries, guys.
We know where you live. We'll be knocking on your door.
That's right.
The very next one of these, by the way, July 28th, Sean Marsh and Damien Fleming. So set yourself in, July 28th. Sean Marsh, who has no shortage of questions, and Damien Fleming, who has no shortage of stories. We'll give you all the details on how to register, but if you're already here, you will continue to be there. We'll be in touch with the two folks who won the auction. Thank you so much. Over $2,000 raised there. And guys, it's a pleasure. Jim, continue to enjoy your night. We'll see you in a month's time, sir.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.